In the exclusive elite shooters club, the luxury was a silent language that was spoken with looks and surnames of nobility. There, between wood-paneled walls, with the noble and stained-glass windows that filtered golden light onto Persian carpets, Blake Radcliffe reigned like a modern monarch. At 38, he was not only 5 times national champion, but also the public image of a famous line of high-end rifles. That afternoon, after nail another bullet in the center of the white, went down your personalized Remington with the ease of someone who knows he is invincible. The applause of those present, men and women dressed in the best hunting brands, only served to reaffirm its absolute dominion over that world where talent, money, and surname, they seemed to be inseparable. Meanwhile, in the same main lobby, Emma Miller was waiting, hugging her leather bag, aged as if it were your only armor against the indifference that the surrounded. His blue cardigan from the discount store, her worn jeans, and her simple ponytail that they did invisible to the majority, or worse still, the object of condescending glances. At 35, Emma had learned not to expect favors from life, but neither, not even she. I was ready for the tide of snobbery that was going to face that day. He held with sweaty hands a day pass, wrinkled and slightly faded, which allowed train during a public session, in theory open to anyone citizen. In practice, that club was a fortress armored against those who, like her, did not belong to the lineage correct. Blake, seeing her from the distance, he let out a barely concealed laugh, attracting his around a small retinue of curious onlookers. With the cruel security of someone who has never been challenged in seriously, he approached the reception, where Emma was trying to understand the instructions for entering. "Are you here to see or to clean?" he said, loudly, causing laughter drowned at their around. Emma, with face flushed but back straight, he didn't respond. He just handed over his day pass, determined not to let that humiliation diverted her from her purpose. It was so when Blake, stung by his dignified silence, raised the bet. He took out his wallet, a black card, and offered, in front of everyone, $10,000 to whoever I'd like, except he challenged to defeat her in a single shot. And if it missed, the humiliation, I would be still elderly. What Blake didn't know, what none of those witnesses would learn until too late, was that Emma wasn't an improviser or a curious bystander. Behind her plain exterior lay a story, woven in sacrifice and discipline. His late husband, Nathan Miller, had been a chief master from the SEAL team, a sniper so legendary that among his companions they nicknamed him the Ghost. Before he died on a mission classified, Nathan Lathere was taught Emma more than many they learned in a lifetime: patience, technique, self-control, and above all, the notion that the true power does not need proclaim themselves. Every free afternoon, every Sunday dawn, had been for Emma a training rigorous disguised as love. And although was wearing years without touching a weapon in front of others, the memory of those lessons was intact, vibrating under his skin as second nature. With a calm that contrasted with the bustle growing of the living room, Emma accepted a challenge. There were no high-sounding speeches, no theatrical gestures, simply nodded with the head, borrowed an old Glock 19 from the practice arsenal, and headed toward the firing line. The murmur spread like a fire. How dare he? What intended to demonstrate that insignificant woman? Blake leaned back on a chair, close, arms crossed, enjoying what she believed it would be a memorable public humiliation. But something in Emma's posture, her measured breathing, the firmness of his feet, the way his shoulders relaxed without effort, slightly disturbed the few attentive observers. When his whistle rang, Emma did not hesitate. She raised the weapon with the security of whom knows every muscle in his body, every millimeter of its target. The shot was clean, almost silent, like an affirmation non-negotiable of his presence. And when the electronic monitor showed the result, silence fell like a curtain. Target shot, perfect center. For an instant that seemed suspended in a time, Nobody knew as react. Blake, with the smile half frozen in his face, it blinked in disbelief. The woman who had been the butt of ridicule had not only complimented the bet, they had sprayed with the same naturalness with which others breathe. If this part shocked you, maybe it's time to share this story with someone who needs a reminder of strength. Blake jumped to his feet, his face flushed, humiliation spreading throughout its neck to his cheeks. He couldn't allow that defeat to be recorded as a simple accident. His pride, his image, they demanded a rematch, immediate and forceful. With a loud voice, he called on all those present to witness a new challenge, a formal competition between him and Emma, using a number of different weapons and shooting at different distances and moving targets. The atmosphere, which until then it had been elitist fun, it was charged with a dense, almost electric tension. The murmurs multiplied. The illegal bets began to circulate, and, in the background, some were beginning to wonder if that confrontation would not be the beginning of a story much bigger. Emma, without unfazed, he accepted. He didn't did for the $10,000, nor even for the opportunity for vindication. Did because in he deep down, I knew that this duel wasn't just against Blake Radcliffe. It was against an entire system that had minimized from the moment he crossed the door. In the days following, while Blake used his influence to manipulate the conditions of the duel, demanding weapons tailored to their needs, adjusting the rules in his favor, spying on everything he could about the Emma's past, she dedicated herself to preparing her spirit. He did not train physically. He did not need perfect what already dominated. He concentrated in strengthening his mind, in remembering every word of Nathan's, every exercise of patience, every moment of absolute control that he had inherited from her mentor and husband. Blake, desperate to find some weakness in her unexpected opponent, it didn't take long in discover the Emma and Nathan story. But far from reassuring him, what he found it filled with a dull fear. Photos of Emma in training camps, reports of her time as an assistant instructor at military bases during family visits, reviews of her ability to replicate sniper techniques with precision almost surgical. She was not a lost amateur in a whim. It was the product of years of meticulous training, a silent heir to the military excellence. Although tried hide his growing concern, they knew good. They began to notice the slight tremor in his hands when signed official documents of the tournament. Have you ever felt underestimated? Tell us about your experience. The comments. The day from the duel came with a dense atmosphere of expectation. The hallways, the elite shooters club rooms, normally reserved for discreet conversations and glasses of expensive cognac, became in bookies and agitated whispers. Emma arrived early, with her worn bag and her serenity intact. He wore no elegant uniform or state-of-the-art equipment, just his old Glock and a concentration that seemed to absorb all the energy to your around. Blake, on the other hand, made a grand entrance, surrounded by supporters, carrying an arsenal of custom weapons that seemed more designed to impress than to fight. The balance, at least at the eyes of the majority, was clearly inclined. But there was something in Emma's posture, that stillness without effort, which was beginning to plant seeds of doubt even in Blake's most fervent followers. The first proof was accurate at close range. Blake, accustomed to the cheers and the knowing gaze of the judges, shot first. His bullets grouped together well, although a couple of shots grazed the outer edges of the inner circle. It was enough to draw a few applause and approving glances. Emma, unhurriedly, took his turn. He took a single deep breath, adjusted the angle of your wrist, and fired. Each impact was precisely centered, one after another, like perfect heartbeats. The silence that followed needed no interpretation. He had surpassed Blake in his own land, and it there was made with a grace that bordered on in the supernatural. The following rounds were no more merciful for Blake. Shots in movement, shooting at multiple targets, rapid weapon changes. In each discipline, Emma showed not only technique, but something even harder to achieve: absolute composure under pressure. While Blake sweated, and his shots became more erratic as he progressed the competition, Emma seemed slipped between the challenges like a precise, almost unreal shadow. The crowd, previously clearly inclined towards her champion, began to divide his loyalties in whispers. Some, more perceptive, could no longer deny the obvious. They were witnessing not a coincidence, but a true master's degree. Blake, feeling as his reputation was crumbling in front of his own eyes, resorted to his last resort: the psychological pressure. Between each round, he approached Emma with sarcastic comments. He tried to provoke her, put her on nervous. "Are you sure you wouldn't rather go back to cleaning tables?" she murmured, after a particularly difficult shot. But Emma, faithful to Nathan's training, there was instilled, did not bite he hook. I knew that the words of his opponent were nothing more than the death throes of a man trapped between his pride and its imminent defeat. He responded with the same serenity with the one that held the weapon, without tremor, without hesitations, as if every provocation will simply bounce off an invisible wall of dignity. The final test was the most difficult: shooting at long distance, in simulated conditions of irregular wind. A scenario that required not only aim, but also the reading ability, the environment, and instinctively adjust every parameter. Blake asked to go first, determined to regain some of his lost honor. He adjusted the viewfinder, calculated he wind, held back the breathing and fired. The bullet hit near the center, but not in the core. It was a good shot, enough to receive timid applause, but not the kind of execution that could erase everything that came before. Emma took his position. It didn't take that long to prepare. He closed the eyes for a moment, as if feeling he whined more than calculating it, and when opened fire, the projectile traveled in a straight line, crossing his heart, same of the objective. As if the universe itself had content, I encourage her, the rumble content that followed. It was more powerful than any applause. It was the sound of a truth imposing herself. Emma Miller had won, not by luck, but by right own. Some members of the club, unable to contain his amazement, they began to clap timidly, while others, still trapped in their prejudices, they remained in a rigid silence. Blake went down his weapon with clumsy movements, clenched jaw, face distraught, by a mixture of disbelief and humiliation. For years, there was believed that his domain was unquestionable, and now that illusion crumbled in front of a woman who, according to his prejudices, should never to have even stepped on that field. Emma did not celebrate. She did not raise her voice. The arms neither look for approval. Simply low his Glock, he breathed deep and nodded in sign of respect toward he white. "As you there was taught, Nathan." He knew that his true victory was not there, in the applause nor in the headlines that would surely emerge after but in the fact of having remained faithful to himself same. She had faced not only a man, but to an entire system of arrogance and exclusion, and what had won without betray his essence. And at that moment, Emma understood that her pain, your loss and his years of silence had not been in vain. Each of those moments had prepared for that moment of absolute dignity. The address of the club, forced by the magnitude of the event, he had no choice but to admit publicly the Emma's victory. In an impromptu ceremony, they handed over a trophy that used to reserve for elite internal competitions. Some of the most influential members, those who previously had looked with disdain, now that they observed with a mixture of respect and fear. But Emma wasn't looking for trophies, neither medals. When you offered to pose for the cameras, it did with a serene smile, without ostentation. He knew that his triumph was far greater than any material recognition. There was sewn a crack irreversible in the facade of superiority that the club had maintained for decades. Blake, meanwhile, discreetly disappeared through a side exit, unable to face the questions and stares that were chasing. His fall was as quickly as his rise had been celebrated. In the days following, your name became synonymous with arrogance unmasked, while Emma's began to circulate as a symbol of resilience and genuine merit. They tried to minimize their feat, attributing it to a stroke of luck, but the majority, including shooting experts from all over the country, were quick to recognize the truth. Emma Miller was an exceptional shooter, trained in the better school possible, that of real life, where the failure was not an option and the perseverance was the only valid currency. In the following months, Emma began receiving invitations for training and competitions throughout the country. Its name became in legend not only for his skills, but for his life story. A woman who, stripped of everything, had managed to achieve what only the richest and most powerful could dream. But Emma, true to her character, never let the success would change it. Instead of seeking fame or money, dedicated his time and resources to help those who, like her, had been invisible. Along with Nathan, her late husband, she had learned that true heroes are not those who stand up in the center of the attention, but those who fight silently without expecting anything in return. If you are inspired by seeing someone stay true to their despite the success, don't forget to support this story. With a like, with the donation Blake's obliged, Emma founded a rehabilitation program for veterans, which quickly became a national reference. He not only taught marksmanship and survival techniques, but also values that transcended any military skill: patience, self-control, resilience, and the importance of the camaraderie. He taught those who had lost everything, including those who were fighting war traumas, who still could find peace, stability, and what more importantly, a new reason to live. Emma she was continuing Nathan's legacy, not just as his wife, but as a silent warrior in his own right. Emma never looked for the attention of the means, but life had other plans. Your story of personal improvement became an inspiration for many, and it did not happen a lot time before the media began to cover their achievements. The interviews came, the cameras followed her everywhere, but he remained humble, always highlighting the others before themselves. In every public speaking engagement, in every coaching session, Emma made sure that Nathan's legacy was always present. He reminded everyone that although talent was valuable, what really made it the difference was the willingness to sacrifice, the tenacity to keep going despite adversity. The challenge with Blake, though, was the culmination of his personal struggle, was not the end of his history. It was the beginning of a journey that would take it all over the country, helping others find strength in their own battles. Many veterans and young people without course, they showed up at their doors, looking for more than just a lesson in shooting. They were looking a purpose, something that would motivate them to get up every morning, something that would remind them that no matter how many times fall, always there is a way to get up. Emma became a beacon of hope, an example living that the scars of the past does not have to define the future. With the time, Emma stopped being seen only as the widow of the sniper. His name, associated first with the pain of the loss, became synonymous with strength and courage. Her students, both veterans and civilians, they considered her a mentor, but also a friend, someone who had traveled the same arid road and that, through sheer determination, had managed to flourish in. In the end, Emma's achievements were not just accurate shots, neither the victories in competitions, but the lives it transformed in his path. Veterans recovering from trauma, young people who found his path, and the families who, thanks to their program, learned to heal together. As the Emma's stories spread across the country, Blake Radcliffe, whose arrogance was once his greatest strength, he began to lose influence. People stopped admiring him, not because of a single defeat, but because, through the Emma's story, they had seen something bigger. The truth that talent and skill alone mean nothing without humility, without character, without the ability to cope with their own limitations. Emma, on the other hand, continued with his mission. without seeking revenge, neither public justice. I knew that the true victory already that there was cattle. Their goal is always had been bigger than a simple competence, had demonstrated that the courage genuine does not need applause to exist. As it passed by time, Emma became into a key figure in the debate on the rehabilitation of veterans. Her personal experience, combined with her skills as a shooter and her dedication unbreakable, positioned themselves as a respected voice in military and civilian circles. She was invited to conferences, panel discussions, and even meetings with legislators where he shared his vision of a comprehensive program that would help veterans reintegrate into society, not only through skill in arms, but also through the emotional and psychological development. His message was clear. The recovery was not only a matter of technique, but of healing the wounds invisible than many they carried inside. Despite his growing influence, Emma never allowed the brightness of its success away from its original purpose. It continued with his simple life, living in a modest house that he shared with his dog, the only faithful companion left of the darkest days, sometimes in the calmest moments, when there was no longer no one in sight and the house was left. In silence, Emma sat in front of a photo of Nathan, and he spoke as if he still were there. He told her about the lives he had touched, the accomplishments he had achieved, and how always was wearing his legacy with she. I knew that the pain of his loss would never go away, but also I knew that by sharing that pain with them, moreover, he had found a form of healing that went far beyond any victory in the shooting range. As Emma's life took a new course, Nathan's legacy continued being a compass for your existence. The relationship they had had, although marked by tragedy, there was left lessons that she not only carried with her, but also shared with the others. In every lesson he taught, in every word he spoke, I felt that he was bringing a piece of Nathan back. She had witnessed his courage in the moments more difficult, and now it was her turn to be brave, not only for herself, but also for those who needed a reason to keep going. In recent months, Emma had been in contact with various government agencies to promote reforms in the way veterans were treated after his return from the conflict zones. He had finally succeeded in making his efforts were recognized at the political level, and his rehabilitation program for veterans obtained funding and institutional support. But despite her achievements, Emma continued to being the same woman who had entered the elite shooters club, a woman who valued silence and effort than the praises and the awards. She knew that her most important victory was not found in the public recognition, but in the impact that there had in the life of the others. Emma's story, though inspiring, was not unique. There were many people who, like her, had had to face challenges immense just to survive. However, their ability to transform the pain in a greater purpose that differentiated. In each testimony of the veterans that there was helped, in every young person that there was taught, it was reflected an echo of his own suffering and resilience. Emma had not only survived, she had found a reason to live fully, something not everyone achieves. Her history, although born of tragedy, was now a beacon of hope for those who felt lost in the darkness. One day, while I walked through the hallways from the rehabilitation center that there was helped found, Emma stopped in front of a mural adorning one of the walls. It was a picture of Nathan, a photo taken in one of his moments of rest, smiling with her rifle at her side. For her, that image was more than a simple memory. It represented everything he had learned and lost. His eyes moistened for a moment, but they quickly dried. The tears, knowing that he would be proud of what he had achieved. Nathan had been his mentor, his companion and his love, and now, thanks to his love and sacrifice, she was helping others find their way. At that moment, Emma understood something profoundly important. Her life, although marked by the pain, had found a purpose greater than herself. As Emma watched the mural, a young woman approached timidly to her. She was one of the veterans who had arrived at the center seeking help, with scars not only physical but also emotional. Your name was Sarah, and she had been struggling with trauma and depression since his return from the war. Emma, the there was met a few weeks earlier when Sarah arrived at the center with a face marked by the tiredness and the distrust. But that afternoon, while the young man approached, Emma saw something different in her gaze. It wasn't hopelessness what it reflected, but a spark of hope that was beginning to ignite. What did you do, Emma? Sarah asked, her voice shaky but full of curiosity. I want to know how you found the strength to keep going. How could I do it? It's same. Emma smiled softly, understanding the depth of the question. I couldn't give an answer, simple nor fast, because its path it had been long and painful. But I knew there was something Sarah had not yet understood. The strength does not come only from overcoming, but also of the acceptance of the pain and the resilience to transform that suffering into something meaningful. And I did it because I didn't have other option. Emma replied, looking at Sarah's eyes. When I lost Nathan, I felt like there was nothing left of me, but what kept me going was understanding that even though pain never goes away, we can choose that do with he. We can allow it to consume us, or we can use it as a reason to do something bigger than ourselves. Themselves. The Emma's words resonated in Sarah, who began to understand that the healing did not mean erasing the past, but learn to live with him in a way that did not prevent advance. Over the next few weeks, Emma dedicated herself to guiding Sarah and other veterans through a process similar to yours. It was not just a physical rehabilitation program, but a journey towards a self-discovery and the acceptance. He taught that the true power was not there in the skill with the rifle, nor in the external victories, but in the ability to look inside oneself, face the shadows, and move forward despite everything. Sarah, like so many others, began to find your own path, understanding that the pain could be transformed into a source of strength if given, gave the place it deserved. As Emma's rehabilitation program gained popularity, it was consolidated not only as a physical space, but as a community. Veterans, the young people and civilians who joined the center not only shared lessons in marksmanship and self-defense, but above all, they shared stories. In those stories, they found themselves already others. And that connection which ultimately transformed the center in a refuge for those who sought more than just an exit, but a real opportunity for redemption. Emma, however, never let fame or success that dazzled. Despite being recognized throughout the country and receive offers from different parties to expand their program, always returned to his roots, to the tranquility of your home, to the simplicity of the evenings, in those that he taught without rush, in your most intimate moments when the people had already left and the center was empty. She sat alone in a chair by the window, looking at the sunset. It was in those moments when I felt that, although the struggle had been long and painful, he had found a purpose that transcended everything he had experienced. Emma, like many of the veterans who had helped, had learned that peace was not the absence of pain, but the ability to live with, without let it be define. As more people came to the center seeking help, its focus expanded. The program began to include group therapies, psychological counseling, and activities that encouraged the emotional connection between the participants. It wasn't just about teaching how to shoot, it was about teaching how to live again, to rediscover the ability to trust the others, to find a purpose beyond of the conflict and struggle. One day, after one of her talks, Emma found herself with a man, Major, who approached timidly. He was a Vietnam War veteran, with the eyes clouded by the memories, and although his body was marked by the scars of the battles past, her voice was soft, almost cracking. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I never thought I'd feel this. So again, I thought there was no more hope for me," Emma said, looked with a smile, understanding more than anyone what there was crossed. "It's never too late to find peace," he replied firmly, knowing that these words were not only a consolation, but a reminder of your own journey towards the healing. As the rehabilitation center expanded, so did it toward the Emma's influence. He had found something much more valuable than the victory over Blake Radcliffe, had found a purpose that connected deeply with the others. Every day, more people came to his door, not just looking to rehabilitate physically, but also emotionally. Emma, however, always remained steadfast in his belief that the true strength is not found only in the muscles or in the ability with weapons, but in the ability to heal wounds invisible than many load in its interior. One day, while walking through the center's grounds, Emma stopped in front of one of the newer walls that had been decorated by the veterans. Each of them there was left a small one piece of art or a phrase that reflected his personal journey. Between the paintings and the words, Emma saw something that touched deeply, a painting of a leafy tree with deep roots and a single petal floating in the air. The painting was accompanied by the phrase, "Strength is not always visible. Sometimes it is found in the stillness of the soul." Emma smiled when she saw that work. It was a reminder that although his path had been long and painful, I had finally found a place where the roots of his life had been established and where the future, although uncertain, he seemed more hopeful than ever. This reflection move you. Save this fragment for your memories, when most of all you need. The work in the wall not only represented the internal struggle of the veterans who arrived at the center, but also the transformation of Emma herself. That woman who had been seen as a simple wife of a sniper, a woman who entered the elite shooters club with nothing but her will, now it was a force unwavering in the lives of others. Went from being a symbol of pain to becoming a symbol of hope and of human capacity to rebuild from the ashes. However, Emma never let the public recognition would change her. Despite the awards and the respect he earned, he always maintained distant from the focus, preferring his silent and constant work. One afternoon, after a especially challenging training with a group of veterans, Emma sat down in one of the chairs from the center, looking at how the sun was beginning to set. The calm of the moment enveloped, and for an instant, everything seemed to be in his place. He allowed himself to feel the satisfaction of knowing that there was made a real difference in the lives of so many people. By his side, Sarah, one of his best students, sat down. They looked at the horizon together, in silence, knowing that the journey they had both taken was not only towards the rehabilitation, but towards inner peace. And at that moment, Emma understood that just like Nathan, there was taught the true heroism does not lie in the fight for the victory, but in the ability to find and maintain peace in the middle of the storm. In the months that followed, Emma continued being a central figure in the world of rehabilitation for veterans. His job there was started calling the attention of more organizations and governments seeking to implement their intervention model in other parts of the country. However, Emma never sought expand, neither create a network of fame. Your motivation was deep and personal, to make others, like Nathan, have the opportunity to heal and find purpose after the war. The popularity of her program expanded, but she always remained in the shadows, guiding with the strength of his example and their actions more than with words or applause. The peace that Emma had achieved was not only the peace of their own internal demons, but also the peace that he had managed to transmit to the others. It was not a superficial peace, obtained through evasion of the pain, but a deep peace, built on the acceptance that life is full of uncertainty, loss, and sacrifice. Emma understood that every wound, every lost battle, every personal sacrifice had been a lesson she now could share with the others. In that teaching and help process, she same had found a purpose greater than any individual victory. One day, after one of the many motivational talks that Emma gave, a veteran approached her with an expression of deep respect. He was someone who had been in combat, someone the scars weren't just physical, but emotional. "I never thought I'd feel the way I did before," she said, her voice shaking a little. "Today, after everything we've been through, past, I feel that I have a chance." Emma said, looked with understanding, knowing that these words not only represented the healing process of a man, but the reason why she continued working every day, no matter what happened to him around. Although the years passed, Emma never stopped teaching. In every talk, in every intervention, she continued to emphasize the importance of the perseverance, of the courage in middle of the adversity. She herself became a living example of what it meant to fight not only with weapons, but with her heart. The real change, he realized, was not happening in the battlefield, but within each person willing to face their own demons. Emma, in the end, understood that in reality, your story wasn't about beating Blake or being the best shooter, but about overcoming the internal fears that limit us and learning to get up again. And again, Emma never stopped remembering the pain of the loss, nor the emptiness I felt every time I thought in Nathan. Yet through all he had been through, he had found a way to give him a purpose to that painful absence. Life doesn't always offer answers easy, but she had learned to embrace his reality, to transform the tragedy into something that would not overwhelm her, but rather strengthened. Every day, when he was with someone who felt he could not go on, remembered his own moments more dark and knew exactly what I needed, say to help them see that in their hearts they still was left hope. With his time, the stories of people who went through his program began to multiply, each of them with his own path and its own hell. He started to find a new one way of life. Emma became a kind of beacon for all of them, guiding them without judge, without demanding that they hurry in his recovery. I knew that the healing was a long process, and I didn't want to be the one imposing deadlines. Your mission was simpler: be there, be a witness, and, if you had luck, a small part of the change that each of your students achieved. It did not matter if the progress was small or large. What mattered was that it was happening. In one of those quiet moments, while he was in her office, reviewing some reports, Emma received an unexpected letter. It was from a veteran who had passed through your program several years. The letter began with words that, for Emma, summed up everything she had been doing for so long. "I never imagined I could change. I thought that the pain was going to be my only companion until the end of my days. But today, after everything I've been through, I can say that I have found peace, and it's all thanks to you." Emma left the letter on the table and stared out the window, absorbing that small gesture of gratitude. I knew that those words were worth more than any award or recognition. Throughout the years, Emma had received several similar letters and testimonies, but none of them that made me feel more proud than that. The reason for her success did not lie in the great victories or in the achievements that the others could see, but in those small moments, in the story's personal change that represented the true impact of its work. In the end, Emma realized that she had touched more lives than she had imagined, and that in his own healing process, was helped others find it too his path. With the past of the time, the rehabilitation center that Emma had founded became a symbol of what can be achieved when facing the pain with courage and determination. Many veterans who once felt isolated and lost, they found in his teachings a new reason to live. In every corner, an atmosphere of resilience and hope was breathed from the center, constant reminder that life, even after war and suffering, always has something new to offer. Emma, however, never let the success of her center would take her away from her principles. Despite the fame and the recognition, continued being the same women, always simple, who I preferred the lonely afternoons and the deep conversations with those who were approaching. For her, the most important thing was not how many recognitions there was received, but the lives he had touched and changed, without need for grand proclamations. He knew that, in the end, his true legacy was not there In the trophies, neither in public achievements, but in the transformation that had facilitated in the hearts of the people who had passed through its path. One day, while walking through the center, Emma realized account of it much that there was grown. Not only the center, but she same. There was gone from being a woman who had been on the verge of giving up, to a leader who guided others through their own pains. The transformation he had experienced was not only physical, but also emotional and spiritual. In the first days after the loss of Nathan, Emma couldn't imagine a future. Today, however, her future was full of possibilities, new goals, and most importantly, the satisfaction of knowing that I was making a difference in the lives of many. One afternoon, while organized some documents in his office, saw what a way to Sarah, one of the newest veterans from the program, laughing with a group of new students. See Sarah, who had arrived at the center. Months ago, with he broken heart and lost gaze, now so full of life and hope, reminded Emma why had started all this. She herself had been a survivor, but seeing how the other people were beginning to heal, he realized that there was not only helped others, but had healed alongside them through every step taken, every story shared, and every life touched. Emma, looking at Sarah and the rest of the students, it was given realized something important. His trip had not been just the yours. Somehow every person who passed through the center carried with them a piece of your history, and at the same time, Emma looked reflected in them. In every face, I saw the fight, the fear, and the hope that had once been part of it same. The rehabilitation center had not only helped veterans rebuild their lives, but also you had allowed Emma to find an inner peace that had believed lost forever. In the end, her life's purpose was not in what there was cattle, but in what he had given to the others. The night in which the center celebrated her 5th anniversary, Emma stood in front of a crowd of people who, although some of them still were fighting, they were no longer alone. In his speech, he did not mention trophies nor achievements. Instead, he spoke of the importance of the community, how, together, everyone could find strength in middle of the darkness. His voice, though calm, resonated in the heart of every person present there, because the Emma's words were not only wise, but were backed up by the life she had lived. That night, while he watched his students smile and hug, Emma knew, with a deep certainty, that she had found her place in the world. With the passage of the years, Emma continued forward with his life, always looking towards the future, but without forgetting what had left behind. Although his life had changed in ways he never imagined, always he carried with him the memories of her husband, of the sacrifices and moments of pain that had joined. Nathan had been his motivation, but as the time was passing by, Emma realized that, despite his absence, he continued guiding her, as if his presence had not disappeared entirely. In every achievement, in every life touched, in every step toward forward, I felt that Nathan was there in spirit, accompanying her at every moment. Victory over Blake Radcliffe, the one that many they thought it was just a matter of skill, it became in the symbol of something much bigger. It was the proof that the true courage is not measured only in the skill in the battlefield, but in the ability to stand firm when life knocks us down. Emma never sought glory nor fame. However, in the end, it became a symbol of what it means to endure, heal, and above all, live with dignity. His history was not one of victory over one man, but over the entire system that tried to crush him, showing the world that even the humblest can have the power to change your destiny. Throughout the years, Emma continued with his mission, guiding generations of veterans and youth toward a life of peace and purpose. Your rehabilitation program grew and spread to other cities, but despite their success, always kept his humility intact. Emma never saw herself as a heroine. For her, being part of the healing process of others was reward enough. Their achievements were not measured in awards, neither in public recognition, but in the lives he touched, in the stories that changed thanks to its aid. In his last day in the center, Emma stopped in front of the same wall, in the one who so many years before had seen the mural with the painting of the tree. This time, seeing the image, smiled with satisfaction. The battle. It had been long, but the tree was growing. The roots, firmly planted in the land, they maintained the branches that now extended toward her sky. As a symbol of what she had achieved, Emma knew her journey was not over. She always there would be someone else to whom help, someone else to give the opportunity to heal. But when you look at yourself in that mural, he felt he had finally found his place in the world, a place full of peace, purpose, and a legacy of love. At the end of her journey, Emma no longer saw herself, same as the woman who had entered the elite shooters club to challenge Blake, the woman who now she looked in the mirror and saw herself as a leader, a mentor, and above all, a survivor who had managed not only to change her life, but also that of many others. The pain that before had marked deeply now served as the foundation on which he built a future full of hope and strength. Throughout the years had touched so many lives that when people were talking about her, they did with a deep respect and admiration genuine. Emma never allowed herself to see her own reflection in the praise, but I knew that real change had happened not only in she, but in the others. Those who once felt defeated and forgotten, now they found in his history a beacon of light, a reminder that no matter how difficult were the circumstances, always there was a way out, a chance to start over. The day Emma received the news that the rehabilitation center I would be officially recognized as one of the best programs of its kind at the national level, it was not a day of celebrations. In his place, passed he day working in the details of a new program to help youths in risky situation. For Emma, the true recognition did not come in the form of trophies or ceremonies. It arrived in the form of people who, through their work, they managed to find a new life, a new chance. While I was walking through the center that one day, Emma saw a group of veterans helping others in the classes. I saw them sharing stories, laughing, encouraging each other. It was in that moment when he understood that his legacy was not only in the lessons that they were taught, but in his continuous cycle of support and solidarity that had now formed between the members from the center. I knew this wasn't an end, but simply other passed in a journey that would never cease to exist, a journey of transformation and hope. In his last day in the center, Emma looked one last time at the Nathan's photograph in the mural. There was no more pain, only gratitude. Throughout the years, there were made what her husband told her there was taught, to survive, heal, and ultimately help others find their way. I knew the impact that had left would never be measured in statistics nor in trophies, but in the lives he had touched, in the stories that had changed, and in people who, like her, got up again and again with a heart full of hope. When walking toward the exit, Emma paused for a moment, looking up at the clear sky. She knew her journey had not been in vain. What there was started as a personal challenge had transformed into something much bigger. And with a calm smile, he left the center, confident that his legacy would continue, because although his body will move away, his spirit would remain with every life he had touched, with every soul he had healed. If this story touched something inside you, prove it was worth it the penalty. Comment, share, or simply go on the page for more stories like this.